The best day of Neil's life was when we met Karen Ramsey, a wonderful, beautiful young woman from the town of Harbor Beach. Karen is a living saint, and everyone should know that she is honorable. Mom, I can't read your handwriting. I'm just going to go with what I wrote. For those who don't know me, I'm Mark McConnell, the only child of Neil and Karen McConnell. Sorry, I do that all the time. I'm an oldest child. If you are sitting here today expecting the oldest child of Neil McConnell to give a serious eulogy, well, maybe you never met my dad. Of course, if Dad was here, he would introduce me and my sisters as Karen's kids from her first marriage, which is technically true. I'm also confident Dad would hear you walk up to many of you and say that you are his second favorite person at his funeral. And just about the time you felt good about that, he would say, everybody else is tied for first. As I heard my sister Dawn recently describe Dad, and Steve just said too, if Dad teased you, he loved you. If you are not familiar with the book, The 5 Love Languages, then I will tell you that Dad's love language was sarcasm. Of course, if you are familiar with that book, you'll know that's not one of the love languages. Dad's true love language was actually gifts. He loved to give gifts. But he was also really good at combining his special talents, and he loved to give sarcastic gifts. When I was turning 16, I wanted a car, and I didn't want just any car, I wanted a Trans Am. I knew there was virtually no chance that I was getting even a broken down car for my birthday, let alone a Trans Am. Dad kept saying, okay, I'll get you a Trans Am. He said it so often that I actually had a small glimmer of hope that I might actually get a Trans Am. And I did, I got one. It was a little remote control Trans Am with shoebox. Cheryl, one year for Christmas, desperately wanted a VCR, back when very few households had VCRs. Cheryl was having a really hard time going to school because she was missing so many episodes of Days of Our Lives. So she wanted a VCR to record her favorite show, and Dad said, okay, I'll get you a VCR. And you know those mailbox letters that you can buy? He bought 3 of them, VC and R. Put them in a box. She did get a VCR later, I think, so. One year, Dawn desperately wanted a moped. That was the rage. And Dad said, okay, I'll get you a moped. That year for Christmas, Dawn opened up a box and inside was a moped. And he said, I think H is silent, isn't it? How do you spell moped? In all honesty, Dad was incredibly generous and he loved giving gifts. Dad grew up with not a lot of material possessions, and I think that drove some of his generosity. Dad loved to buy Mom gifts and jewelry, and of course Mom's love language, not gifts. Kind of drove her crazy at times, but she also knew that was Dad's way of expressing love. Dad also loved buying Christmas items, trees, snowmen, nativity sets, you name it. If you go to Mom and Dad's house between Thanksgiving and Christmas, it looks like Bronner's is having a yard sale. I've been immensely preparing what I'd say at Dad's funeral for a long time. Of course, I never wrote any of these thoughts down until the last few weeks, so I'm confident I'm forgetting all the good stories I want to tell. It was in 2006 when Dad first collapsed and had a pacemaker installed. He's been sick for a long time. Dad lived longer than any of us really expected. He lived longer than every member of his immediate family. His parents both died when they were in their 60s. His siblings both died when they were in their 70s. You know all those studies that suggest that exercise and a healthy lifestyle lead to longer life? Well, Dad laughs in the face. Dad had a lot of things he loved. Steve mentioned some of them. He loved Ross Bible Church. He's been attending here for 55 years. He loved singing in the choir. He loved special music. He loved playing games. He was just slightly competitive. He made up rules to almost every game so he could never lose. He loved playing board games. Every time I came home, he couldn't wait to play Scrabble. His all-time favorite was a board game called The Choir that he played with Roger and Daddy Allen along with Mom for years. I can't really say that he loved his job at the post office, but he did love the friendships that he made there. After he retired, He loved watching television. He loved making cookies and giving them away. He loved his Bill Gator homecoming videos and his Southern gospel music. And he loved his community at Big Boy each morning for breakfast. Speaking of which, today is also likely the funeral for the Fort Gratiot Big Boy, since I think Dad was single-handedly keeping him alive. I asked my sisters, what are your favorite memories of Dad? And Cheryl mentioned that the ice ponds that we used to have in the backyard. From the earliest days that I can remember, Dad would build an ice rink in our backyard, and back our old house on Main Street to the house on Angus Road. He perfected his craft of building ice ponds over the years. He would spend countless hours in freezing cold temperatures building just the perfect ice rink. He put up sideboards and floodlights and hockey nets and benches. Not to mention all the times he would go out and shovel inches of snow off the ice so that we could use it. But Cheryl later thought her most vivid memory was the night that she got engaged to Greg. Greg and Cheryl came back to the house late at night to show the ring to Mom and Dad, and Mom and Dad had been sleeping, so woke them out. Mom in her bathrobe and her bedhead, and Dad was pretty silent standing in the hallway and finally just looked, pointed at Mom and said to Greg, "Take a look, this is what you look forward to in about 20 years." But then I asked Dawn what her favorite memory was, and before I really say too much more, Dawn is really the stereotypical youngest child. She got away with everything. She kind of still does. She's really a bad influence on my parents. Steve already said he didn't want to tell a story. It had to do with Dawn. We don't have that much time. But Dawn's favorite memory was when my dad used to have a riding lawnmower and he would mow the lawn, and Dawn would go and sit on his lap, and they would sing as loud and out of tune as possible the song John Jacob Jingle Punishment, which I think is the song that doesn't end after that. I just kept going. But the whole neighborhood obviously thought they were nuts. But I will also tell you that it's a sweet memory because Dawn sang John Jacob Jingle Punishment to Dad on his last day, and that was the last song he heard, which, if you ask me, is better than the Gator videos, but that's okay. My core memory, earliest memory, was here at Ross. I was probably 8 or 9 years old. And there was an elderly lady that attended here at Ross, and I think that we've tried to remember what her name was. I think it was Agnes Barnes. And she was this lady that Dad just teased relentlessly. And I remember as a kid being a little bit afraid of her because she was always grabbing and yelling at Dad and swinging her purse at him and telling him to knock it off. And I just thought, this lady is kind of scary. And I remember one Sunday evening service in the old auditorium, somebody came running up to Dad, grabbed him, and I was with him, and we went to the back, and Agnes had collapsed to the back steps, and she was laying there. And we walked up, and I just vividly remember Dad walking up to her and saying, "What are you doing? You can't lay here." And she responded, shaking her fist at him and telling him how rotten he was. And Dad stayed there with her until the ambulance arrived. And in fact, at one point, he sat down next to her and was holding her hand. And I just, for the first time I remember thinking, she actually likes him. I didn't realize this. And I really realized the power in connecting with somebody through humor. And it probably took me as a kid a long time to figure out how to use that appropriately. And my sisters will tell you I'm still trying to figure it out. Dad has spent a lot of time in hospitals over the past few years, and especially the past few months. And somehow, I'm not really sure how, we made it through all Dad's hospital visits without Mom ending up in jail. Because every time we go to the hospital, the nurses come in to do the routine welfare check, and Dad's answers were always about this close to putting him on the social service watch list. Do you feel safe at home? Well, it depends on our mood. Do you have any fears about going back home? No, she only beats me sometimes. And of course, Mom would laugh and say, "Neil, you're going to get me in trouble," which is exactly what a guilty person would say. I don't think the hospital staff really knew what to do with him. My earliest memories of my dad revolved around sports. Dad was constantly watching sports and playing sports with me. He always just played with me. Every time he'd come home from work, we'd go out and play. Whether he was playing catch in the yard, he taught me how to pitch, shooting hoops, basketball in the driveway, playing hockey in our ice rink. Sports were always present in our home. I started writing down all the sports memories that I wanted to talk about, and I ended up with 5 pages, and I said, I can't read all these. So I tried to narrow it down to a couple. Hockey was probably the first love for Dad and I. I went to my first game with Warren Marine here in Port Grand when I was 5 years old. Well, at the time it was the Port Grand Wings, and it became the Port Grand Flags. We just went to so many games over the years. And it was truly the start of my sports obsession. And I remember Dad taking me to the old Tiger Stadium for the first time, and we went many times to those games. In my later adult years, I had the privilege of returning the favor and taking Dad to Tigers games every year. What was really interesting as we became adults, as I became an adult, when going to those Tiger games, was the car rides down I-94. And we had conversations I never expected to have with him. I still remember the first time Dad said to me how lucky he felt to have married Mom, and how proud he was of his family. And I literally remember the spot on I-94 where we were, because I remember thinking, oh, we're having a moment here. Serious conversations were the norm in the McConnell household. And I had a similar moment just a few weeks ago in the hospital with Dad. He had been having hallucinations and kidney and liver problems, and I think he must have had a sense he was just not going to recover. And Mom had just left the hospital room, and it was just me and Dad. And he told me that he got a better family than he deserved, and how he had the best children in the world. I gently reminded him that he was forgetting about his 2 daughters. Maybe the hallucinations were back. His grandkids were definitely his pride and joy. Dad had a very unique way of interacting with young kids. Something he did when he was around Mom's preschool kids. If he saw a child wearing a red shirt, he would say, "That's a very nice yellow shirt you have on." And if you want to get a bunch of 4-year-olds wound up, start teasing them about colors. And Dad understood that pretty well. Dad had his favorite lazy boy chair at the house. My kids, when they were young, couldn't wait for Grandpa to get out of that chair. And as soon as he got out, they would jump in that chair and wait for him to come back. And Dad would grab one arm and one leg and pull him out of the chair, and then the next kid would go run in the chair. And that usually worked until I had 4 kids, and then they just kind of overwhelmed them. And Cheryl's kids had an annual tradition. They loved going to McConnell with Grandpa. And all the grandkids just had a great bond with Grandpa. And I have a grandson as well, and on Thanksgiving Day he was there, and Dad was pretty out of it. But I held Theo right at the foot of his bed, and I said, "Hey Dad, Theo's here." And he looked up and said, "Hey buddy." And he only said 3 words the whole day, that was to him. And the grandkids and the great-grandkids had just a special meaning to him. On behalf of my mom and my sisters and our families, thank you for being here. Your love and support has meant more than we can possibly convey. A special thank you to those close friends my mom and dad have shown up in big and small ways over the past few weeks and months. A special thank you to the Rosses and Maxwells for moving back into town to entertain my parents. Thank you, Pastor Steve and Pastor Tim, and the entire Ross Bible family for your love. A big thank you to the hospice nurses, and especially Jennifer Green, who were just amazing in their care. And probably the biggest thank you of all goes to Lori and Patty McConnell, who've literally just been amazing to my parents and have taken such good care of them. They are really the loving daughters my parents never had. On behalf of my dad, and I feel like I have the most respect and training on what he might say, on behalf of my dad, it's a Thursday morning, you're all sitting in a church at a funeral, we should really all get a life. And finally, I'll say that Dad got his wish. He told me on one of those car rides to the Tiger game that he wanted to pass before Mom did. I definitely did not want to outlive her. He said something like, "She would be fine without me, but I'd be lost without her." As for me, Dad, almost made it. I'm going to miss our Tigers games. I'm going to miss our Scrabble games. I'm going to miss teaming up to pick on Mom. I'm going to miss talking about sports. And even going to Big Boy with you for breakfast. Thank you for being here.